What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a long-awaited comparison between my dual-duty Integra Type S that I've set up mostly for daily driving but also for monthly track days, I would say, against Gridzilla's FL5 Civic Type R. I reviewed his car a while back. It must have been at least a year ago now, back when it was almost bone stock. All it had was some lowering springs, but now he's gone to town. Aero, power from an upgraded turbo, suspension from AST, two-way adjustable dampers. He has spared really no expense on this build. And so the question I want to answer is, which one's actually more fun to drive on a canyon road? That's what we're going to find out. So quick recap of my car. I have the Öhlins Road and Track Coilovers. This isn't yet the final production kit for the DE5 Integra Type S. This kit was actually designed for the FK8 Civic Type R. I did give feedback to Öhlins to try some different spring rate setups, but right now we have a 6 kilogram front rate, 10 kilogram rear. We're also on the Apex VS5 RS wheels. These are the 18 by 9.5, and we're running Kumho V730s in a 265/35/18. As for brakes, we're on the stock Brembos with just some endless CC40 pads front and rear. Engine is completely stock. The only other thing I've done recently is installed some Whiteline lower ball joints at the front to give me more camber adjustment. So now I have minus 3.1 degrees in the front and the rear is around minus 2.3. Quick recap of the specs. We are powered by the K20C1 engine. It's a 2-liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder, 320 horsepower in the Integra Type S, 5 more than in the Civic Type R. And we have 310 pound-feet of torque. Limited slip differential, manual transmission is your only option. The car weighs a little over 3,200 pounds, only about 30 pounds heavier than a stock Civic Type R. If you look at the retail value of all the mods on my car, you're looking at around $7,000 to $8,000, whereas Michael, aka Gridzilla, has at least probably 4 times that in his Civic Type R. So let's see if the mods actually enhance the driving experience. Every time I drive my car on this road, I'm reminded just how well Honda and Acura tuned this car to feel less front-wheel drive than pretty much every other front-wheel drive car on the market. It is astonishing how well this car puts the power down. Oh, and it stops on a dime. These Brembos with just some pads. And the Öhlins suspension, as I've found out a couple of times, handles a bumpy road like this really well. It's just incredible. That rear spring rate, 10 kilogram, it feels a little stiff for daily driving, as I've mentioned before, but when you're pushing the car, it really helps this car come alive, really helps the rear of the car rotate, while the relatively lower front spring rate helps the car turn in well. It's a really well-balanced setup. Oh yeah, what a fantastic machine. The only thing I wish this had was a little bit more engine sound. Not necessarily the exhaust. I think from outside the exhaust actually sounds really good in Sport Plus mode. But from inside the car, especially with a helmet on track, I have trouble hearing this engine at times. Not so much a problem out here though. There is still a little bit of torque steer. I haven't driven a single front wheel drive car with over 300 horsepower that doesn't torque steer to some degree, but this one really does a great job at minimizing that. Really, I mean, look at this. I can just feed the throttle on exit. The LSD pulls me through, stays on my intended path. Oh, wow. It's no small accomplishment for a car that makes so much power. Granted, 320 doesn't sound like a ton of power nowadays, but you gotta drive this car before you jump to any conclusions about the straight line performance, because oh wow. It is properly quick. A lot of that's due to the mid-range torque and the way that this engine continues to pull. close to its 7,000 RPM red line. This is my first time driving the car since the lower ball joints were installed, and with 3.1 degrees of camber up front, the car definitely turns in noticeably better, and on corner exit I can get on the throttle a little bit earlier. And the Öhlins suspension is still a really good dual duty setup. You can drive this car, as I do, every single day. I would love to try this setup with an 8 kilogram rear spring instead of a 10 kilogram, just to see if that makes the car a little bit more settled over bumps and expansion joints on the highway. But when I'm pushing the car hard, either on the track or on a canyon road, this setup feels fantastic. It just gives me full confidence everywhere. Ah, just a beautiful handling and driving machine. Can get so deep on the brakes. I'm just in the zone right now. I have so few complaints with the way my car drives. I mean, the seats are not great in the Integra. There's very little bolstering. In terms of the actual driving dynamics of the car, dare I say, close to faultless? Outside of a few potential suspension tweaks, I really don't have anything bad to say about it. Look at the torque here. So much mid-range torque, and yet it still pulls hard at the top end. Love that about the K20C1. A very high bar to set indeed. So I can't wait to see how much another, say, 20 to 30 grand of mods will improve the driving dynamics of this platform. All right, so we're now in Michael, aka Gridzilla's Civic Type R 2023 FL5. The mod list on this car is ridiculous, so I will drop it into the video description, but let me just go through some of the main items here. We have the AST Moton 5200 coilovers, Doteki spec, 8 kilogram front spring rate, 10 kilogram rear. We have the Apex VS5 RS wheels on this car as well, but these are 19 by 9.5 plus 45, so they're 1 inch larger in diameter than mine, same offset, and this is his street wheel and tire setup, so we're on a Michelin PS4S. We have a PRL intercooler, flex fuel kit, MHI drop-in turbo, downpipe, Hondata tune, PRL stage 1 intake, etc, etc. On 91 octane gas, this is making around 360 to the wheels. On 100 octane, it should make around 420 horsepower. On 91 octane, this should be making close to 80 wheel horsepower more than my Integra Type S. And it's still a full interior car, how he's got his baby seats in the back, so it's still a roughly 3,200 pound curb weight, about the same as my car. But what I'm most curious to see is how this suspension feels. 8K front, 10K rear AST dampers versus my Öhlins Road and Track, which is 6K front, 10K rear. Let's just go for a drive and see how this thing feels. I know this goes without saying at this point, these Civic Type R seats are amazing. They are so much better than the seats in the Integra Type S. And here's the thing, they don't sacrifice on comfort. I could definitely do a long road trip in these, no problem. Plenty of support for my lower back, but I'm just held in at the upper back as well as the thighs so much better. Engine plus R, steering sport. Engine sound, you know what, let's put this into sport. Rev match is in sport, gauges in plus R. He also has a short shifter, so the shifts are definitely a little bit higher effort, but the throws are slightly shorter and it has a little bit less slop. Oh, okay. That is a lot more power than my car. Wow, this is next level in terms of power. Ooh. A little bit of skipping at the suspension over that bump back there at the rear end. Love the sound of this Miltech exhaust. Just the right amount of aggression without droning. That's really nice. It's valved also. So much grip. We're on just a PS4S tire. Oh, this feels phenomenal. You can tell it's a track suspension though. It doesn't have the same level of compliance on a bumpy road that my Öhlins provides, but the handling is so sharp. Oh yes. You know, one thing I wish this car did better, given that it's a more like 80% track car, 20% daily driver, I wish it had a slightly sharper front end from a steering feel perspective. The steering basically just feels stock. There's a little bit of slop in that EPS rack. I wonder how we could get this even sharper at the front, so there's no sort of slop in that initial turn-in at all. This engine just explodes at around 4,000 RPM. The Paragon brakes feel fantastic. They don't actually feel all that different or more aggressive than the stock Brembos with some pads. That's actually a good sign. These should hold up to heat better, but still offer plenty of modulation. That's what you want. Definitely stiffer than my car, that's for sure. Even though my car has the same rear spring rate, this feels just a lot more track focused in terms of the damping. You feel more of the little bumps. The suspension feels like it's keeping up with the small up and down motions going over the road a little bit better. But over the big bumps, this is definitely a lot bouncier. I would love to try this thing on track. I can just tell, even driving on a bumpy surface, that this suspension will do phenomenal on the track. The way I describe a real track suspension versus a more dual-purpose suspension, when you go over bumps, the suspension reacts quicker. Say you go over a road with 5 consecutive bumps back to back. With a really well-tuned track damper, you feel the suspension compress and rebound 5 times, and it keeps up with the speed at which you're going over those bumps. Whereas in a more softly sprung daily driver setup with appropriate damping for that use case, sometimes it doesn't quite keep up. You kind of just feel it compress and rebound maybe once or twice rather than all 5 times. That's the impression I get whenever I drive a car with really high-end track dampers. This car is really easy to drive quickly. Despite it being a lot more aggressive than mine, it still retains that drivability that I love about my Integra Type S. And this definitely feels multiple notches more capable compared to a stock Civic Type R and the stock suspension, which is just a mess. Whoa. Over that section, this thing's pretty harsh though. More power, more grip, minus the fact that we're on street tires. But the suspension, the aero, everything's been elevated. Does that make this a more fun to drive car on a canyon road? I think the answer is, it depends. It depends on what you like. If you like the feeling of a track car being driven on a bumpy road that it's not really designed to be on, then the Civic Type R will give you that. But for me, I like a more sort of mild setup. something that feels good in multiple scenarios, as a daily driver, on a bumpy canyon road, and on a racetrack. And that's where I think I've really found a good balance with my Integra. This one doesn't actually take it too far to the track side of that spectrum. It actually still does feel relatively comfortable. You know, that makes sense for Michael's use case because he does a lot of track days, he does time attack events. I do maybe one track day a month. All right, one more straight line pull here. That mid-range to top end is just crazy with this thing. From 4,000 up to around 6.5 where it starts to die off. This engine feels phenomenal. 360 wheel horsepower on 91 octane gas with just a drop-in turbo, some bolt-ons, and a tune. And the chassis can still handle it. That's the beautiful thing about the FL5 and DE5. These chassis are capable of much more than the stock power numbers. So with that being said, guys, a big shout out to Michael, aka Gridzilla, for giving me a go in his track prepped Civic Type R. Let me know what you think about this build. To answer my original question, is the, say, extra $20,000 to $25,000 worth of mods worth the price? To be determined, TBD. Once I get this thing on track, I'll see just how much quicker it is than my car. My car feels 90%, 95% as capable on a canyon road while offering quite a bit more daily drivability and comfort. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think of these two platforms and these two builds, and I'll see you in the next one.